Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Monday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky, JJ Redick is going to be introduced today. The draft is coming up this week. There's a lot going on next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday. No matter how or where you get your podcasts, it's always free. It's never behind a paywall. And Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 24,000 subscribers, all of whom are excited to see JJ Redick introduced this afternoon as the next head coach of the Lakers. We're getting ready for the draft. It is going to be a busy week with free agency starting next week.
The 30th.
Yeah.
June 30th.
That's next week. That's this, it's a week from like yesterday or today or something.
Yes.
I was told there'd be no math. Before we get going, I do want to just say a quick thank you to folks who are local to LA. A lot of people, Andy and I were at what's called the Mandy Awards. It's the ESPN LA, the radio station that Andy and I do some work at. Andy, you hear all the time on the pre and post game broadcasts. They had their annual awards and a bunch of you were there. A lot of people coming up and saying hello and not just talking about the on-air work, but the podcast and appreciating the podcast and work we do every day. So thank you to you guys. If you are ever out and about and happen to see us, please do come say hello. We appreciate it.
Very much so. It is. We've been doing this a long time. A lot of different incarnations covering the Lakers, whether online, whether TV, whether podcasting, radio, whatever. You never get used to just how flattering it is to hear from people directly that they appreciate your work. I mean, it's an incredible feeling that never goes away. So thank you.
Yep. So, please do if you see us, say hello. We love to do that. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. This summer, FanDuel's hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There is something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So this afternoon, Andy, JJ Redick will be introduced as the next head coach of the Lakers. I presume that is why the Lakers have called the press conference. Maybe it's something else. What are you?
They do actually have a lot of questions to answer that have nothing to do with JJ Redick, which is why we suggested that Rob Pelinka do a press conference weeks ago to get all of that out of the way. But it's neither here nor there now.
No. What are you looking for in this afternoon? What do you want to hear? What are you intrigued to find from Redick? There's obviously mentioned draft is Wednesday, free agency is in a week. Like it is hit the ground running time.
I would love to hear more details about just what he envisions for how the Lakers are going to look on both sides of the ball, the type of stuff that he wants to run. A broad idea of how he pictures the Lakers operating. I would be curious to get his thoughts on just what is it that you've never done this before. Mm-hmm. How do you even go about figuring out what it is that you know and what you don't know? Because while obviously he's watched enough coaches to have an idea of what coaches do during the course of a game, course of a season or whatever, there is stuff that goes on in terms of delegating that authority, delegating work to different places that he's never done before, and like the best ways to go about doing that. I'd also be curious to know, are there any particular coaches that you've had over the years that you are either implementing certain things that you saw from them as coaches on the floor, stylistically, communication, that sort of thing? I'm very curious just to learn broadly, what is it that he's looking to discover in this process, the same way we are looking to learn more about JJ Redick as a coach?
Yes, very much so. I think from like that question of influence is one that I've been thinking about, because that gets to a lot of different things. That's not necessarily the person whose offense informs mind, the person whose basketball philosophy about, what type of sets to run. And that's not necessarily what that answer means. That could be, here's how, you get the impression JJ Redick paid very close attention to what he was, what was being done around him, who was doing it. There's the talk that, the Lakers would love to see, and then even Redick would love to see, like, Stan Van Gundy join him, who was Redick's first coach in Orlando, join him in LA, and whether or not he can or would be willing to is very much up in the air, given some personal stuff Stan Van Gundy went through with the death of his wife this year. But is he a person who would want Van Gundy around because he wants to lean on Van Gundy for, X's and O's to bounce off, sets and plays and things like that, and develop an offense? Or is it because he really values how he put together the program, how he communicated, how he delegated, the way he delegated to coaches? And obviously, a person like Van Gundy is going to be able to see and anticipate and contextualize difficulties or challenges or situations that Redick is going to run into as the head coach that he's not going to be equipped to see fully, only because he's never been in the job before. Not because he's stupid or unqualified or this and that. He just hasn't seen it before. And so a person like Van Gundy or Scott Brooks or those types of people, whether you like their offenses, their defenses, their, what they did on the court, they will also be able there to expand Redick's view of what might be happening in any given situation.
I mean, I look at something like this in the same way that I've always talked to people that are about to have kids for the first time with parenting. You theoretically and sort of broadly understand everything that is expected of you, the basic job duty, a lot of it, particularly when your kids are infants and newborns, a lot of it is really very self-explanatory. Like, there's not a lot to figure out, but you have no idea what it's going to be like to be in the proverbial bleep until you're in the proverbial bleep. And there's nothing you can do to make that learning curve never present itself. It's like anything new that is a radically different change from what you had been doing before.
Right. And you can read, you can prepare, you can listen to podcasts. Yeah. You can't do it until you do it.
Right. And JJ Redick is obviously an expert on all things NBA. He is an expert on being coached. I think he has a pretty good idea of what makes a good coach, what makes a bad coach. I'm sure he has had many coaches, staff members and stuff that he thought were incredible. I'm sure he's had many that he thought were absolute jokes. But either way, how he goes about doing this stuff is going to be a learning process. I think it helps that he is a really smart guy. I mean, it's just obvious. And he is, by all accounts, an incredibly hard worker, an obsessive over this stuff. He is a basketball geek in the best way possible. But it will be, I think, very interesting just to hear his perspective on just the things that he is most excited to deal with for the first time, and just negotiating that learning curve.
So there are a couple other things I want to get in on this before we move on, because we are speaking on Monday, have spoken by the time a lot of you have heard this, with Mike Garcia, otherwise known as Canyon Driver on Twitter, a favorite among Lakers fans for draft coverage. So we'll have that program done. But Andy and I want to get into a little bit kind of to preview that conversation about what we're looking for from the draft. There's so much intrigue about what the Lakers may or may not do. So a little more on Redick, getting into the draft, all that coming up next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by eBay Motors, passion driving patience. It's what brings home the winning trophy. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle leveled up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. And with all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and to bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers.
So Andy mentioned that I might want to explain what's going on with my hands. I'm painting a wall and didn't wash my hands before the show started. So this is the color of the wall that we're painting. It looks lovely up there, but this is what's going on. So
yeah, I mean,
if you didn't know, it could be worrisome. I understand.
No, it's not even that. I'm not worried about your health or anything like that.
Oh,
I just want. Well,
There's a nice way to say that.
The nice way is I knew what was going on, so I wasn't worried about your health. I wanted to make sure people understood why the host of a Lakers podcast is doing this work, waving his hands around while they're green. I thought that would be at least.
Oh, you were thinking of the Celtics thing. I thought you were worried that my hands just look weird.
No, they look weird in part because they're covered in green paint.
Right, but like you were thinking of it like also too from like the low key Celtics thing.
I don't think I really need to get into the weeds to explain why you doing this show with green paint on your hands looks kind of weird. Like, it doesn't require much explanation, man.
Well, I feel like now we've given it. So anyway, the stuff with Redick is I want to get kind of a feel to, like, the Lakers have an opportunity to, ideally what you're getting with Redick is a guy who has all of the intelligence and the capabilities of, Pat Riley, for example, is a name that was just to throw out a name that was randomly picked over the course of this process. But without some of the predispositions and baggage and stuff that coaches have, and like people say, like, no experience is a bad thing, and it kind of can be, but it also can be a bit of a good thing because you are not loaded up with some of the things that coaches are supposed to do, and whatever. You have a very fresh, and you can think outside the box, and you can come in with a different way of doing it because nobody has pounded that out of you yet. So that could be one of the potential advantages for Redick. And so trying to get a feel for how he might look at the job differently because he has never been a head coach, and the ways that might benefit or at the very least impact how the Lakers operate as a program, but also how they might run their offenses or things like that. I'm very interested in that concept as well.
I mean, there was a detail in the Athletic report from Shams and Jovan and Sam Amick that said, quote, Redick explained his decision-making process when it comes to strategy, how the analysis and empirical evidence would always guide his choices rather than preconceived notions or outdated beliefs. And that can be easier to do when you are a bit of a blank slate as a coach. I mean, I don't know, for example, someone like Max Christie, who, I spent a lot of last season saying that I wanted to see play more. And I know that I was not alone among a lot of Laker fans or a lot of Lakers media. I don't know how in detail Redick would get about what he envisions for Christie, just because, technically Christie is an, impending free agent, that sort of stuff. Sometimes they get cagey about those sort of things. But, if he's willing to talk about it, what he envisions for Christie, what he envisions for Rui. Rui's come up in a couple of reports from The Athletic or ESPN about the young core that the Lakers picture Redick or Dan Hurley or whoever, helping develop as part of a culture. And Rui is someone that I think has spent his time in LA periodically not being played to his strengths, or periodically, I think, being misused. And so I'm curious about that, curious about his ideas for Austin Reeves, if he's willing to divulge the ways that he's looking to get Anthony Davis more involved in the fourth quarter, all those sorts of details. Also, again, in talking about what he envisions for the Lakers on both sides of the ball, I'm also willing to. I'm very curious to see if anyone asks him. So, what was the rationale for not having Anthony Davis on your all defense team?
Yeah, I mean, he's explained that before. But to kind of go through it again, ostensibly, AD hell could be in the building. Who knows?
Oh, I hope he is. I hope AD asks the question.
Yeah, but that they did speak last week, and that is something that Redick has explained his thinking there. But still, to do it, in the press conference is something that will be interesting. But like that what you're getting at, to your point, like about Rui, about Christie, and things like what you do with players who are very skilled at one thing and have very obvious flaws in other ways. How do you maximize those players and protect their weaknesses? Or, do you say, what, this guy, his weaknesses don't work with what I want to be able to do more often. Rui's not a good enough passer. Rui's not. I've watched the way he moves offensively or defensively, and it's just not going to work with what I was. So, maybe he becomes a candidate to get traded, or whatever it might be, or maybe he becomes like, don't you dare trade this guy because I see these three things, this fourth thing and fifth thing. Trust me, it's not going to be a problem with what we're doing. And work it out that way. And I think Christie is another example of that kind of player. Lakers last year, when they tried to use him on ball, for example, as an initiator, and so it was a disaster because that's not what he's good at least not yet. But when, put out as like a more of a 3-and-D threat, and stuff like that, he was much more successful. So, and that gets into too, like the idea of, with the draft coming around, I'm sure he'll be asked what kinds of players, what he's looking for in the draft, what his philosophy around the draft is. And, his answers there, to the extent he gives them, I think could be pretty revealing about the type of player that they're looking for on Wednesday. There is a great deal of intrigue, Andy, around what the Lakers are going to do with that pick at 17, whether they're going to keep it, trade it, or whatever. But if they do keep it, like what kind of players are they looking for this year? First round, 55, the Bronny slot. If they buy into the second round, just that type of player, like what exactly it is you're looking for. I want to hear that from Redick and from Rob, for that matter.
I mean, I imagine if they get into any specifics, it won't get. I don't think it'll go any further than probably best player available, if for no other reason than not wanting to show their hand,
sure,
and not give away any information. I hope, my personal hope is that they are looking, unless there is a guard that is just so good you cannot pass up at 17, I really hope they are looking for a big wing, like a 3-4 type player, or a center that they feel like can actually be on the floor for 10 to 15 minutes a game. Because I think the roster, as currently constructed, but also when you take into account the players that are harder to find, those are the ones that they are lacking the most. I still learning up on some of the prospects that are out there, but it seems like there are some guys at those positions, the 3 through 5, that, they may not have incredible upside, but they could be available to help right now. And the more we get closer to this draft, the more I think there are compelling reasons to keep this pick, like in terms of just keeping your books away from, the second apron, some of these. It's not even the tax implications or what the Buss family is willing to spend. You start getting into really, really big restrictions that get in the way of making trades and constructing your roster. Like it's not just the cost. It starts becoming much, much more difficult to have any flexibility at all. So a young, cost-controlled player, particularly on a team that does not have a ton of youth, it would help a lot if this player, I would not, especially after JHS, draft another project. Like, I think if they're going to use this pick, it needs to be on somebody you are reasonably confident can play now. But I think there is a very, unless there is a third star or some, super, super high-end role player that you think you can package that pick for, I think there's starting to become very compelling evidence that you should keep that pick.
Yeah, and you look at somebody like Dejounte Murray, who I don't think the Hawks are going to move fast enough on Murray. I've read a lot of different things a lot of conflicting information about how, what Atlanta wants to do, what Trae Young wants to, like all these different things, because that's the season that we're in. But none of it points because of that to the Hawks. If they're really interested in keeping Murray and trying to leverage Trae Young, really get him out the door, obviously they're in no hurry. I think for somebody like him, where you can see like, clear role, it might offer a little bit of flexibility with what kinds of things you think you can do with D'Lo, and his contract. Like if you could do something reasonable to get a guy like that in on draft night, I think so. But beyond that, I'm trying to figure out what they could do, trading that pick, getting something back that improves them, and based on who is reportedly out there right now, and I just don't see a lot of it. I 100% agree with you that to the extent that you can, I would sacrifice a little bit of ceiling for the ability to contribute this year. Like they need as many good, healthy, compelling, playable bodies on this team as they can possibly put out. I think last year proved that 100 times over.
Yeah, and also too with Alex Caruso traded to the Thunder for Josh Giddey, as far as things that could have possibly been done with that 17 pick, it was a terrible idea, even with theoretically Alex Caruso being included as a sweetener, some type of deal for Zach LaVine. It's a awful idea. But now that Caruso isn't even on the table as a possibility as part of an expanded trade, Zach LaVine should truly be off the board as a potential use of that 17. Like, it's terrible idea before, but it's terribler now. So
yeah,
one thing off the list.
When we get back, one more point to make about the draft related to Redick and coaching style. And then are we finally, Andy, at a place where Chris Paul is going to be a Laker? We'll get to that next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by FanDuel, and we all love sports. And we love sports so much, we never want them to stop. But as playoffs and different leagues wind down, you start getting fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like we want them to. But FanDuel lets you keep the sports going whenever you want. All you got to do is open up the app and dream up any bets that you want anytime you're in the mood. You got baseball, you got the WNBA. You do have options, folks. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. So there's going to be something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
Just like one final thing on this whole being able to use a guy this year, even for a 10-minute role, 15-minute role, or at least have somebody who is playable if you need 10 games out of them because these three players are gone. Like JHS, the problem with him last year wasn't that he couldn't come out and like just demand a roster, a rotation spot or whatever. It's when they needed a guard. Obviously, Flat needed a guard for a certain stretch of time. He wasn't playable. He also wasn't healthy. I am hopeful, a strong offseason, he comes back, and in some ways the Lakers can add another player. It's like adding a new player to their rotation, but we'll see. That's not something necessarily you can bank on. But that can be based on one skill. And this gets into a little bit of like the free agency stuff coming up. It gets into the philosophy we're talking about with like Rui, or how do you want to use Max Christie, or all these other things. Like, it might be that Redick I need a guy who can do this. And if he can do this and whatever this is, and corner threes, a guy who can come off a screen and shoot, or, an excellent back cut, or whatever it is. If you can give me one of these guys, I can find a way to use him, as long as he's not catastrophic in these other areas. And so, it wouldn't shock me to see the Lakers jump into the second round and try to find somebody with a very specific skill. And you might be wondering, like, why that guy? And then, camp rolls around and you get a feel for, oh, okay, maybe that's what may or may not work. But, again, how do you maximize the talents that players have and hide the places where they're deficient. The draft is obviously a huge place where that sort of thing happens. We were there, Andy, when former Laker Chris Paul left the team. And since then, it has been rumored, it has been talked about. I think there was some conversations over the last year or two that it was finally going to happen, never did. But now, Andy, we do seem to be in a place where we are getting closer to that possibility that Chris Paul, if the Lakers want, could really, truly, this time, finally be a Laker. Your thoughts?
Well, maybe. Maybe it's going to happen. Mark Stein, with his outstanding Substack, reporting, quote, I keep hearing that Chris Paul, if he actually makes it to free agency at some point, would draw interest from the Clippers as well as the Lakers. Paul's desire to play as close to his LA-based family as possible is well known, but I'm told interest in bringing him to the Lakers may not be unanimous within the organization, despite Paul's well-chronicled friendship with LeBron James. The Stein's reference to if he makes it to free agency, Chris Paul has I believe around $30 million that is non-guaranteed for next season. The Warriors have to waive him by a certain point or else the money becomes guaranteed. I've been reading some that they may push back the date a little bit or maybe bump up part of what Chris Paul would make regardless, because they want to try to give themselves the option to trade Chris Paul if possible and, turn him into an asset as opposed to just outright waiving him and he walks away and you don't get anything for him as an asset. And, Chris Paul likely would be, amenable to it just because it means he gets the possibility of keeping more of that money, or who knows, maybe a team even takes on his full contract just because they feel like they can turn around and flip him sometime next season, whatever. But were he to get waived and become a walkaway free agent, that sets up the scenario where he could end up joining the Lakers at age 39. He is already 39. He will be 40 by the time the playoffs roll around if the Lakers are, say, one round into them. So that in and of itself presents some of the complications with Chris Paul. Like last season with the Warriors, I wouldn't say he was bad, but if you look at his numbers, they are near or among career lows for pretty much everything.
And not just on not just on like a absolute raw basis.
No. You start looking at
advanced numbers and all that.
Advanced numbers per 36, like 2-point percentage, which matters a lot because Chris Paul used to be just deadly from mid-range, and he still does a great job with assist to turnover. Like I think that's just something Chris Paul will always be able to do well, and at a veteran's minimum, because both I can't imagine the Lakers giving him more, and I'm not sure they will be able to give him more even if they were willing. You could do worse. I would explore whether or not you could do better, especially considering he has a history of getting hurt near or during the playoffs, which is theoretically the reason he's on your roster in the first place. He's not there to be a regular season innings eater. I can promise you that.
I think my biggest problem with guys like CP, and it's not like, yes, he's still an NBA caliber player, and he can give you real minutes, and you got to be careful. He's older, he's injury prone, and all of those things. It's that he didn't play like a 10-minute a night role in Golden State last year. When he was healthy, I think he would average like 24, 25 minutes a game. Like he was
26. Okay.
Yeah. So it was up. I knew it was up there somewhere in there. I didn't have the numbers in front of me. And so when, that's a significant role in the rotation. And I don't necessarily object to that. But the problem is when you have a guy, I'm always concerned about minimum salaried players whose gravitas sometimes puts you in a position where you feel like you have to play them more than maybe their age, their station, whatever it is, like what they really deserve or what's best for your team. And, theoretically, the Lakers coming back next year with, I think D'Angelo Russell, at least right now, is more likely to be on the team than not. I'm not saying it's a stone cold lock, but like if I have to pick one, I'd pick, but just because the Lakers better off, unless they can construct something, they're better off signing him and keeping him rather than letting him walk. So you have that. You have Gabe Vincent. You have Austin Reeves. You have, hopefully, like I mentioned, Hood Schifino, capable of playing. It wouldn't surprise me if they signed a different guard too. It's like, I don't know who they're going to draft, but
plus all the guard stuff LeBron does anyway.
Right. So at some point, like, does his skill set, does having a great assist turnover ratio matter if you're not the one really handling the ball? If you're not if by giving Chris Paul the ball, are you taking it away from other people who need it more and benefit the Lakers? It's not that I object to it. It's that I always get concerned about, whether or not guys really, they'll say, yeah, I only 15 minutes a night roll. It's fine. Whether they'll actually do it or they'll be happy or they'll be good at it. That's the other thing too. It's not even like some people are willing to play a 12-minute a night roll. They're not good at it. It's hard to find them the right 12. And so again, I'm not against it, but I just don't, I can't say I'm wild about it either. I would love to think that there's another avenue where they could find a guy who could do what they want CP3 to do and come without some of that expectation.
You just start getting back to, again, that question of, is there really a role for Chris Paul? And a pressing need for Chris Paul. So we'll see.
Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go to hang out, see the show. We will bring you everything we can from the Redick press conference. We got Mike Garcia coming on to talk draft. So a very busy week. Thanks again for all the people who said hello over the weekend, and we will see all of you tomorrow.